You're listening to episode 101, Healing from Past Trauma Through Writing and Peer Support with Christine Cissy White. Welcome to the Grass Gets Greener podcast, the show for survivors by survivors. I'm your host, Melissa Wilson, a bullying survivor and anti-bullying advocate. And each week you'll hear from a survivor who has overcome a traumatic experience to go on to not only survive, but thrive, so that you can too, starting now. Hey guys, welcome and thank you for being here. This is the first episode after episode 100, so we're on to the next 100. And if you haven't checked out the 100th episode yet, you can do that at thegrassgetsgreener.com/100. That's the number 100. But I have a great episode for you here today. I'm going to be joined by Christine Cissy White of healrightnow.com. And Christine, or Cissy as she goes by as well, is going to share with us today about healing from developmental trauma and neglect. And she's going to tell us about how writing and peer support have really helped her in her healing journey. In particular, she's going to tell us about how she learned her childhood was traumatic after being diagnosed with PTSD as an adult, how becoming a parent and learning about attachment helped her in her own healing, how the healing journey can feel daunting and how she dealt with that, how being able to realize that the effects she was dealing with were from how she was treated changed the way she saw herself, the importance of healing, not just in therapy, but also with others who have been there and who get you, and realizing that you're not alone in what you're going through. We're also going to talk about prioritizing self-care, how telling her story has made her be more open in general, and how feeling joy is a part of healing as well. So lots of good stuff in here, and I really enjoyed this conversation with Cissy, and I think you will as well. And so without further ado, I'm going to go bring her on. Cissy, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining me here today to share your story with us.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. And so I first heard about you from past guests of the show, Lisa Floyd, from episode 69. And I'm glad that she told me about you because your story is one that I definitely want to have shared here on the show. And I love the work you're doing today to raise awareness about the effects of developmental trauma and to show others that it is possible to come out on the other side of it. And your blog, Heal Right Now, How to Live on Earth When You Were Raised in Hell, you write about living, loving, and parenting well as an adult survivor. And so I'm eager to hear your story and the journey that has led you to where you are and the work that you do today. And what I like to do here, Cissy, is start at the beginning of your story so that we know where you're coming from, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound okay to you?
That sounds great.
Yeah. I mean, so, kind of tell us about your childhood and the circumstances that you were raised in and what you experienced.
All right. Well, it's interesting because when I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder when I was in my early 20s, and the reason I start there is I learned in that process that my childhood was traumatic. But, I didn't know that growing up. And I think so many of us, if our experiences are normal to us, whatever they are, even if they're bad.
We don't know anything else, right?
Right. And so I didn't know what developmental trauma was, and I didn't know that people could get PTSD from things other than being in the military or seeing combat. So I was pretty surprised that I guess I didn't know that other people had it different. So my mom was a teenager when she had my older sister, and she had a rough start herself. So there was abuse and addiction in my family, and there was physical violence, and I don't know how much detail to get into, but in the
it's up to you.
I'd say for me, it was as much of what did happen as what didn't happen, which had an impact on me as an adult. just what was going on in terms of abuse, and there's also what wasn't going on in terms of neglect that made me feel pretty like I did. When I got to my 20s, I just felt like I don't know how to be human right. You know, that's how it felt to me. I didn't know what PTSD was, but I just felt like I don't understand being human. It feels so hard, or it feels different, but I didn't know why.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point there that it's not necessarily just the things that happen to us that affect us, but it's the things that don't happen either. The things that, you know, we're kind of denied, right? That other people might, you know, typically experience growing up as a child. But when there's neglect involved, then there's that lack of, and that can be just as damaging.
Absolutely. And I think for me personally, it was the harder or the slower thing to recover from, because I didn't, all the wonderful things I've learned about self-care and healing, it was really slow for me to learn those, because I knew how to endure things, and I knew how to get through things, and I knew how to disconnect from myself. But I really struggled when I was learning how to connect to my feelings, connect to my body, connect to my own needs. I mean, I didn't really know the difference between symptoms and sensations. And so I thought like feelings were really overwhelming, and I wasn't all that interested in feeling them at first, you know, like I was just like, they're all bad. Feelings are all bad. Because for me, healing didn't start like because I was in a happy place. So there was anxiety, a lot of anxiety, and it took me a long time to trust like that there would be something else underneath it that would be good, or that connecting to myself would eventually be like. Now I feel like, oh, when I'm not connected to myself, I feel it and I know right away. But when I was first healing, it would take me like weeks to feel like to even identify what was going on. So
Yeah, and that was because of the neglect growing up.
yeah, I just didn't attend to myself. Like I knew how to ignore myself really well, and in some ways, like I could get through bad weather. I could be walking outside in the cold and like kind of just shut it out. And it's not like it didn't ever have perseverance, or it didn't have some positive aspects, but it wasn't good in general because I didn't really respond to myself. I just sort of ignored or disconnected or denied my own needs. So when I was in healing, even when I was the adult, like responsible for taking care of me, I really had to learn what the heck that meant. Like I didn't get it, to be honest. So I felt like healing was really puzzling, as well as it wasn't just kind of grappling with, and I don't mean just to minimize abuse. I don't mean just in that way. What I mean is I had no context or no opposite of what should have been happening when I was being abused, or what other people go through when they have a healthier childhood. So I had no way to contextualize it. So for me, becoming a parent and learning about attachment was really, really important in my own personal healing process, because it wasn't until I was an adult that I was like, oh, people are supposed to depend on people, and you're supposed to be responsive to yourself and other people. Like I had all these negative associations that needs were bad or scary or threatening or might make me vulnerable. And then those were just my beliefs that came out of where I came from. But it wasn't until I was older that I was like, oh, that my beliefs are based on my experiences. They're not like the truth of how people are supposed to be when things go better. So that I felt like I had to dismantle a lot of like beliefs that I just thought were truth and not as a result of my experiences.
And that's so hard. Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, no. I just feel like that's the part that's so slow.
That's a hard thing to do, especially when you have these beliefs for so long. and they're just, they're what you know, they're second nature to you. And then you have to like try to, undo them and change them and have these new beliefs. I mean, that's a hard process and that takes time. So what happened when you got diagnosed with PTSD? You said when you were in your early 20s. What did that kind of do for you? Did it help to give you some answers and give you some clarity, or was it kind of scary and confusing thing?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, it was helpful to understand that, like, it was called something. I had a lot of anxiety, and it scared me. I had, when I was first diagnosed, my sister had met our biological father, who we hadn't seen since since I was a toddler. He was an alcoholic. He had been abusive, and when he got back from Vietnam, he wasn't present in our lives. He was homeless. We heard how he was doing, but we didn't have contact with him. And so she had accidentally bumped into him in Boston one night, and it was so jarring because we hadn't seen him for 2 decades. And at the same time, my stepfather and also my grandmother both were battling cancer. And it was those 3 things together combined, for me, set off anxiety attacks, which I had never had before. And it was just terrifying. Those were terrifying. I didn't know what was happening. It felt like, I remember at the time feeling like there's a fire under my skin. Like there was just so much discomfort, and I was just scared. So the first therapy was, in getting a diagnosis, helped me have context. But then it was also scary because I just couldn't, it didn't seem like there would be a fast fix. Like it was a little daunting to realize that my childhood was responsible for how I was feeling, and there was going to have to be a lot of sorting through. And at the time, it was when everything was talk therapy, so there wasn't a lot of getting grounded in your body and things that I find really helpful to me now. It was a lot of talking, and which did help. It definitely helped to have a supportive person that I could talk to, but it took me a long time.
It's kind of limiting, I think.
Yeah. I definitely wouldn't recommend only talking to somebody, today. And I think it is much different now.
You also bring up something else that's interesting there about how, once you realize kind of what you've been through and how, what you need to do to kind of heal from that, it can just feel daunting and like it's going to take such a long time. How did you kind of, get past that and, allow yourself to go on that journey to heal, rather than look at that and feel overwhelmed by it and not even bother trying?
Yeah, I think that, that whole thing about hitting rock bottom, in some ways, because I was having anxiety, healing became appealing because it was like, oh, this is going to relieve that. I'm not sure if I think I would have done it much later in my life, honestly, if I wasn't struggling with anxiety, because anxiety was getting in the way of school for me. It was getting in the way of work. And that was scary to me. It was really scary that I was like, oh my God, I just felt like I felt overwhelmed by my own feelings. And that was so frightening. So healing, that sort of opened me up to, I wasn't super willing and eager in the beginning, other than just to try to get relief. But then over time, I felt like I could see that, like, oh, I can have healthier relationships, or I can change things for not just myself, but like my family system. And that became really motivating. Like, it wasn't just trying to, it did feel like a warrior's journey or a hero or a heroine's journey. Like that definitely helped me when I thought like, oh, I'm taking something on that's bigger than me, but like it's a journey that other people have been on, and it's kind of like an identity or a quest. And that helped me feel like it had more importance than I'm just trying not to be in pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like you just got to a point where you were in so much kind of discomfort that it was more appealing to you to try to work on that and get some relief somehow, than it was to stay stuck with, in
Yep.
the situation that you were in.
Yep, absolutely. I was definitely not I was a resistant at first, and I was resentful. I mean, to be totally honest, I think it's funny and a little bit brave now, but when I look back, when I was first diagnosed with PTSD, I had been to therapy for a little while, and the therapist was helping me. Like, if you fill out an insurance form, you can get coverage, because it was a struggle to pay for it at the time, and I was still at the age where I could get covered under my mother's insurance. So she helped me fill out the form, and when I got to the diagnosis part, I put the names of the people who had abused me as my diagnosis. And she's like, you can't put that. And I was like, but that's why I'm here. And she's like, yeah, but you won't get covered. And I was like, but if they don't change, like that's the that's the problem. Like, why do I have to get a diagnosis? And
Right.
I do understand. Yeah, and there's a part of me that still thinks like, I was on to something then. Like we can't just treat people with symptoms. Like it has to be addressed on a bigger level, because there was something I feel like truthful in what I was saying. Like just treating symptoms didn't, it was stigmatizing. Like I did feel like I got a label and I got this diagnosis, but I was doing something that was healthy. Like, isn't that a good thing? Isn't that a positive thing?
Right, exactly.
So that in a way, like I understand, that people get diagnosed for having a cold. You have to fill out a form and get some box to get treatment. But it also seemed unfair to me, because it just doesn't address the fundamental problem, and just treating, just the people that have the symptoms end up being burdened, and it doesn't change anything. The people that are abusers might still be abusing.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Did it make you resistant at all to get therapy because of that?
I mean, back then it did. I worried about getting a label. I worried about having a label, and I also felt like, it was just unfair. Like I didn't feel like it was.
It's like you wanted the help, you wanted the treatment, but you didn't want the label associated with it because it wasn't your fault that you needed it in the first place.
Right, and it didn't address anyone else in my family at the time, so I also felt like I felt scapegoated, to be honest. Like, oh, it is just my problem. Like, it's just my problem, or I'm just too sensitive, or it's not. The problem isn't that I was abused or neglected. The problem is like how I feel about it or how I'm responding. So I felt like that part was unfair. And I think, this one of the reasons that I love that you do this show, and one of the reasons I wanted to be on here was I think, back then, survivors, we didn't have access to each other. We, the only place, at least for me, this was, 20 plus years ago, the only place that people were talking about abuse and trauma was in therapy, if at all. And there wasn't the social media, and we weren't being able to talk to each other as directly. So I think that goes so far in helping us not feel shame and stigma, and knowing like, oh, other people have these issues too. It's not just me. It's not like I am just having a problem with the way I was raised, or I'm just too sensitive, those are the things I thought, when I was a teenager and into my 20s. I just felt like the problem was me. I was constantly looking to try to fix and change myself instead of thinking like the problem is interpersonal violence. The problem is neglect. The problem is the way the cycle has repeated in my family. The problem is that my mother and father weren't treated better and they didn't know how to do better. Like it, over the years I've come to see, what the quote unquote problem is very differently. And that has certainly shaped how I feel about myself and doing this work personally, but also, with other people too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine how lonely it must have felt back then when, you're looking to find other people out there who are going through what you're going through just to validate your feelings, and you can't find it. And I read about how, basically you had to become the person that you needed to find back then, right? Like you had to become that person because you couldn't find that person out there.
Yeah,
Right?
I remember I would ask my therapist, like, I appreciate therapy, but I want to talk to somebody who's been through what I've been through and is on the other side. Like, that's what I need. Like, I need a Sherpa. I need somebody that's done this mountain and knows the way, and I believe, knows the way up and the way down. And like, that's what I need, because I didn't have a lot of faith that I was going to be able to do it. And I didn't have a lot of evidence that anyone else did either. And I wanted to hear from other people. I wanted to know. And I also really wanted to know really practical things. Like, I think people have this idea that survivors of anything, focus on, the bad things that have happened to us. And the survivors I know, we're always talking about the present. We're talking about the way the past impacts us now. It impacts our parenting, or it impacts our relationships, or it impacts our sex life, or it impacts our ability to trust, or it impacts like very present day things. It's not like I'm stuck in some memory loop that I can't get out of. It's just my daily life is still impacted in some ways. Not nearly as much as it used to be, but the things I struggle with now, they're all about the present, and they're all about like needing to talk to other people about parenting, and talking about, what's appropriate discipline, and talking about how do I set boundaries, and things that I didn't learn and I want to do differently than was done in my life. But I don't necessarily have a lot of role models or people that are in the same boat. And those are the people that, I want to talk to, not necessarily as therapy, but just as like friends and peers and parents. And that I think, is changing now. Like, thanks to shows like this, like we are, and social media, we are able to talk to each other in a whole different way. And that, I think, really helps. It's not just in therapy that we're speaking about these issues, which of course therapy is helpful, but it's, sometimes you just want to talk to someone who gets it.
Yeah.
Like, as a peer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar for me. I remember, when I was really struggling after, I had gone through a bullying situation and everything, and I was, starting on my healing journey in my early 20s, and this was about 15 years ago, and there wasn't any resources available, and so I felt like, once I get to a better place, like I needed to become that person or that resource that I was looking for back then. So I think, it's great that we have these resources available today, and so many of us are putting ourselves out there and making ourselves, available to reach out to anyone who, needs help and needs that guidance, and that's why I love to do this show, because to put it, the way you said, it's kind of like all of my guests are a bunch of Sherpas, right? And they've all been there, and so they're all helping the listeners, I hope, guide them along their healing journey.
I just love that, because also I think the more that we're talking, it's like, just going with that Sherpa metaphor, but like there's lots of different mountains and lots of different climates, and then there's lots of different climbers. So like just finding all the different things that, work for one person that might not work for another. Yoga works for some people and writing works for some people. And like the more people that we know and the more people we hear from, the more likely we're just going to hear new ideas and hear from people that resonate for us. And I think that's really good too, because, when it comes to trauma treatment, it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of finding what works for different ages and stages of your own journey. So it isn't linear, and just hearing what different approaches other people have found. I also think that's really helpful and hopeful. And it doesn't matter if we've been through the same kind of trauma, just knowing like other people are doing something similar, I think is helpful for a lot of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've talked, a bit about how you've been affected by what you went through growing up. I'd like to talk more about, your healing journey, and tell us about how writing has helped you, because I know that's been a big part of it for you.
Oh, writing has been so amazing. I mean, I think in the beginning, when just as a teenager, I kept a journal. I kept a journal since I was 11. And I think that for me was, paper and pets were totally unconditional. Like those were the two things that totally got me through childhood.
Paper and pets, you said?
Paper and pets.
I love that.
I mean, I had that open, like I could confide in my diary. So it sort of had that feeling of like, there's somebody else that I can go to, even though it's like, it's paper, but I could write it in the form, I would write journal entries like I would write in the form of a letter, like I was writing to somebody, or even though I didn't show it to anybody, I still had that feeling that I was conversing, and I swear it did help. And even if it just got me writing. And then also pets. I mean, pets were awesome. I had dogs and cats when I was growing up, and they were, fantastic companions, and I'm so grateful for that. But writing itself, until my 20s, I didn't share a ton of writing. And then even in my 20s, I didn't write too much about my own personal experiences, but I did find a lot of joy. Just like I really like writing, and I loved reading, and I got to know about other people's experiences with suffering, and it kind of normalized just like being human is complicated, like for everybody, and at least when I was young, it felt like everybody else was just having so much fun, and it was so frivolous and light, and I did not feel that way, and I felt so serious, and I felt more comfortable like in reading, because so many of the characters had like seriousness and dramatic stuff going on, and that was comforting. Just like life was complicated, and it didn't I'm sure other people in my life growing up had it complicated, but it seemed like everybody was, to me as a kid, that everybody was having a good time, and I was kind of like not. So reading and writing were just like another world to, it felt more comfortable. And then as I got older, in my 30s, I started going to writing groups, and that was incredibly healing for me, because I think that was when I started to realize, even though I had this diagnosis with PTSD and I still have it, I also was like, everybody has a story. Every single human being has a story. Everybody's got stuff. And I think that was a really connecting thing for me, to just connecting with other people, that I could hear people's stories and get intimate and close up in people's lives. And in my social life, it was a little more awkward, but in a writing group, it was gets pretty intimate quickly, but it also has boundaries. And for me, that just felt great.
Mm-hmm.
I could leave at the end of a writing class or workshop, and you could share, but you had some power on how much and if and when, and other people were sharing too. Everybody was sharing. And, so again, it was that peer thing where most people are sharing and there's maybe one guide or facilitator. And that was just so bonding and healing.
Yeah. It sounds like a kind of therapy in its own right.
Yeah, it was super healing. It was super healing. And I had one writing teacher, and she was so awesome, Nancy Sloan-Maroney, and she'd teach these things writing from the heart. And you could write about the most, difficult thing, but she would only focus on like your adjectives or your word choice, or she wasn't overwhelmed by the topic or any subject. So it sort of shrunk trauma down a little bit, so it didn't feel quite so big and hard and bad. She's just like treated it like a topic, or like the Sherpa thing again, treated it just like, oh, that's the mountain you climbed, like, well, tell me about your mountain, and then to the next person, tell me about yours, and it was kind of equalizing. So yeah, that was super super healing for me, and kind of got me over and out of that feeling like I'm fundamentally different than other people. Just like, oh, that's just a feeling. Like, that's just a feeling. That's not the truth. Everybody's, happy sometimes, vulnerable sometimes, scared sometimes. I mean, granted, we all have different stuff, but it bonded me. I didn't have that feeling like I'm a fake person or I'm just trying to pass for normal, which for a lot of my life, I felt like I'm just trying to pass for normal instead of really connect.
Mm. Now, I want to get back to something you had mentioned earlier about how it was scary to have feelings, right? Tell us more about that, and like, how did you kind of resolve that, or find a way to get comfortable with your feelings?
Yeah, that was I don't know. For me, I was really like a super busy. I was kind of like I was kind of an overachiever and just super super busy. And although that's more socially acceptable than a lot of things that people do compulsively, I was just running from myself. I was just so detached from my body and my feelings, and they did, like, literally my sensations scared me. If I had butterflies in my stomach, it was so uncomfortable for me, and I would feel like I just wasn't at ease. It took me a long time to learn to relax and get easy and curious about my own feelings and sensations. And for me, I think that the thing that helped me the most with that, besides journaling, but journaling was like more still in my head, like describing things more than feeling them, like really slowing down and like listening to guided imagery. That helped me. And then practicing yoga helped me feel like a little bit more connected to my body and in a safe way. Like those, yeah, I don't know if I'm being terribly clear, but it honestly took
No,
practice.
I think it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it took practice. I literally had to practice. Like, I would almost like wine and dine myself with like guided imagery. So there'd be nights when I would go home, I would make a bubble bath, and I would put on like guided imagery for an hour and try to slow myself down. Like, and it took practice. Like, it was not comfortable. But I knew I was running. I knew like I needed to stop running. But it was for a long time kind of a tug of war, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It was not like I just dove into it. And I think one of the things, I was just talking to some other trauma survivors earlier in the week, and one of the things that I think gets missed is a lot of us, if we got really good at disconnecting from ourselves, those are strong, strong skills and survival instincts, and they kick in automatically sometimes. Like that's a way of being. And if you have danger or threat, it's a great way of being. It can help you be safe. If you're constantly scanning for danger, you sometimes can prevent more harm. But I just didn't know how to stop scanning. And I didn't know how to start scanning for good things. It was like I was just like a GPS, not a GPS, but it was like I was only looking for danger all the time. And I had to really practice over time, reminding myself literally, you are safe. The danger is over. You are not in danger. You are safe. And that process, I wish it took quicker than it did. It was a lengthy process, but I'll say it did happen. And now, if I feel discomfort or unsafe, I know it immediately. But I didn't in my 20s because I grew up having to still be able to go to school and get dressed and eat while being unsafe. So I could handle my daily tasks of life while being in danger. But when the danger ended, I sort of was lost. I didn't know how to let my guard down and let myself really, really feel that the danger was over. That took a long time.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing because we just get conditioned to be that way and to always have our guard up and to be, expecting something bad to happen. Even if our mind knows that we're safe, it's the body will still react. It's expecting something. It's just going through the motions that it's so used to. So it takes a while to break that and to start, scanning for those good things to happen instead of always expecting something bad to happen.
Exactly. And I love all the neuroscience and about the neuroplasticity of the brain, because when I first heard about gratitude journals, I sort of was it didn't really speak to me. But then when I understood those behaviors help the brain scan for good. It's actually a skill. It's a muscle that needs to be used. The neuroscience made me understand why that made sense, because when I first heard about it, I was just I don't really actually feel that grateful. So it felt kind of fake. I didn't really get it. And then I was that even can be practiced. And the more gratitude I feel and notice just things that are working well, the more faith and safety I just feel overall. And so over time, I would be oh, I feel the difference. So it became more appealing. But at first it was totally a leap of faith, because I was I don't get how that works. That does not sound that even makes sense to me. But all the things about neuroscience, I think, really help. And that's why I also love the ACEs. I mean, I love learning about the ACE study and adverse childhood experiences, because I also think it helps people understand all human beings are impacted by adversity, and we might be impacted in very, very different ways, but if we have a lot of adversity, it impacts us. But then also the good news is, if we're parents, the more we protect our kids and the more our kids have safety, that is a blueprint for health. So for me, learning about ACEs was it helped me understand my past. But then it also was this is high priority for parenting. The more safety that my daughter has, the more freedom she's going to feel and health in her whole life. We think so much about kale and if our kids sleep and what they eat. And of course, all those things are important. But I was there's little that's more important than her feeling safe. If she doesn't feel safe, all those other things, they're not enough by themselves. Feeling safe is fundamental.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've mentioned the ACEs on the show in the past before with another guest, and I'll have a link on the show notes page to where people can find out more information about that if they're interested in checking that out and seeing what their score is and what that means and everything.
Yep.
Yeah. But so Cissy, tell us how are you doing today? What sorts of things are you maybe still struggling with?
Well, today I'm a parent. I'm a mom. I have a 14-year-old, and I love being a mom. I love being a parent, and I am also an activist, and I'm a writer, but mostly, I'm inhabited. Like, I am inhabited in my body. I feel inhabited in my life. It's not like I never have stress or I never have symptoms. I mean, I just moved twice, and I have to be really vigilant about my own self-care things so that my stress doesn't get too much, because me and stress is just does not, if I get too stressed out, then I start feeling anxious, which is just not comfortable for me. And I just like feeling better. So
Mm-hmm.
I really work hard to keep a balance, and I really pay attention to what's happening in my life and in my body. And I'm 50, and I still, am working on fine-tuning that and paying attention more and listening sooner and saying no more often and, taking better care of myself without apology. And I think the older I get, I'll just keep doing that more and more, because I can feel the difference when I do.
Yeah, no, it makes a huge difference. I have up on my board over here, it says, it's okay to choose you,
That's great. I love that. I haven't heard that.
We forget that sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think it gets easier whether it's healing or age or practice or being around other people that do it too.
Mm-hmm.
All those things, help make it seem less strange, to prioritize self-care. I mean, I used to think it was selfish, and now I think if I don't do it, no matter what I say, my daughter's not going to learn how to take care of herself. If I don't prioritize self-care in my actual life, then she won't believe what I say if I'm saying she should.
Mm-hmm. Right. You have to be that example for her.
Yeah, and just walk the talk.
Tell us, when did you start your blog, and what kind of led you to do that?
Well, I started my blog in 2014, and I had been writing a little bit for Elephant Journal and some other outlets, and I had written, but not about my own personal story, until my 40s. And I think once I hit my 40s, I didn't feel like I was lying, but I felt like I was writing around the edges of the truth. I was a writer, but then I was avoiding certain topics. And then once I hit my 40s, I just felt like this is who I am. I was less concerned with how other people perceived me, or if I did, pass for normal, which was a lot of my earlier in my life. And I was more just this is my life. I'm not trying to get over or be done with some particular thing. This is just my life is my story, just like anyone else's life is their story. And it's always going to be, I'm always going to have the past I had. And I don't want to feel like I'm carrying it like a shame or a secret, or I was waiting for other people to be more vocal. And then I sort of just came to that point in my mid-40s where I was like, I'm hoping other people do something I have not yet been willing to do myself. Like I'm looking for someone to do something and I'm like, I'm not even doing it. I'm not even speaking out or up. I'm not talking about topics that I'm wishing other people were. And so I'm like, I've been waiting for this for 20 years. So maybe it's time for me to start doing it, because there has to be other people that are also waiting for that and looking for that. And I really didn't care if it was like a small number or a big number, but I just feel like just speaking as trauma survivors for ourselves and not having other people always speaking for us, or not having trauma only be seen as a clinical issue. It's like, it's something that happens to a lot of people, and it's a writing issue, it's a parenting issue, it's a person issue, and it's not something. I think a lot of people are afraid of the topic, which and I think talking about the way trauma has impacted my life is a big part of my life, and so not talking about it, it just didn't feel truthful anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like it's definitely been a good experience for you.
Yeah, and I've met so many other people. I've met so many other people, online. I've met people in person. I do workshops now, just talking about what it's like to parent with post-traumatic stress when you're trying to break the cycle and you're trying to parent differently than you were parented, and you're figuring all that out. And I've met incredible people, and I am hopeful that, we all can have a little bit more of a voice and speaking for ourselves, whatever our stories are. I think that just basic fundamental thing is what a lot of us who have a lot of trauma or adversity haven't had. Just to be able to say, like, I have one friend, Heidi, and we share cards with each other and tell each other what cards we wish we could send on Mother's Day and Father's Day. And like, just being able to share, like, there's no card that captures, having a homeless father. Like, there's no card in the Hallmark section for this. Like, and her sharing with me her particular story, and how there's no card she can buy that fits for her. And for her, it's on a different holiday, but just being able to share that is sometimes all we need. Like that is just like, yep, that's the truth of my life. That's the truth of my day. That's the truth of this moment. And that makes me also feel more connected to the people in my life, because I'm not trying to tiptoe around certain topics, or I'm not worried that I'm going to make other people uncomfortable either, because I have people that kind of get it, as well as people that, it's okay if they don't get it because they have different experiences. But it doesn't feel like either or anymore. It just feels like we all have a story, and some people, I that I can relate to, and some people, I can be more open because I'm not hiding anymore. Like I am not like keeping a secret in or holding something back or down. So I have a lot more openness to people that aren't survivors as well, because I'm not just searching for other people that get it. So that's sort of been a beautiful surprise about talking kind of more publicly and openly about my story, is how much more open I am in general.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you find that's like a very freeing thing? I mean, for myself, I mean, I love that, I feel like I feel like I'm an open book right now, and I can just, talk about anything. And it feels good to be able to do that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's like you don't have to hold anything back or cover anything up, where maybe, before that's what you were doing, and it's like it's hard work to do that,
Yeah, and it's all this hard work that keeps us from knowing ourselves and other people from knowing us, and therefore us from knowing them. So
Yeah.
maybe
Mm-hmm.
we think we're like protecting ourselves, or maybe we think other people can't handle certain topics or subjects, but a lot of time it's just that wall becomes so big between us and other people, and that's where a lot of the pain is too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that you have this Heal Right Now Center. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I have some writing classes, and like one of them was like, it's just a safe place to be a survivor. Like, you don't have to write about trauma per se, although there is, some evidence that expressive writing helps traumatic stress, but it's just writing with peers and writing whatever comes up. So you don't have to censor anything. Everybody gets similar writing prompts, and people have the option of sharing or not. We just simply go in a circle and people can share what they've written if they want or not, and the feedback is only positive. It's very similar to Writing from the Heart approach or Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones, and just doing free writing style, which isn't necessarily about getting published or writing a poem or a play. It's just, one of my mottos is express, not impress. You're writing for yourself. In this setting, the writing is for joy and for connecting, and like for us to have a safe place and community to get connected. And how much or if we share, is less important than that we're just like kind of telling ourselves the truth and just saying this is how it is, in relation to this subject or in relation to this prompt, and just being with that and other people. And almost always, I would say more than 90% of the time, people choose to share, but I think it's really important that silence is total participation and is not required. Nobody has to share, because I think that makes people feel safer to, when they do share, like it's not pressure. You definitely don't have to, and there are definitely people that don't and pass, including myself. I don't always share. There are times when I'm like, I don't, that it feels more powerful to have privacy. And there are other times when it feels powerful to share. So I think even learning that, that we are the narrator of our story, and when and who we tell and if and how, and that's powerful as well. And just connecting with other people. And also, whether or not we're survivors, like, there's just so few places that we get to be kind of quiet and creative and, in that kind of a space where someone's asking like a question or a prompt or asking someone to share about, some particular experience. I think a lot of people long for that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome. Now, is this an in-person thing?
It is an in-person thing. I give out prompts every once in a while on the website, but mostly it's in person, where we do feedback. Although there is somebody, if people are interested, there's this like great woman, Laura Davis, online, who gives people feedback if they write. She gives out a prompt every Tuesday, and anyone can join. It's like this online writing community. It's great. I dip in and out of it all the time. And she gives feedback to every single person who writes, and then other people who are in the circle give feedback as well. But people can do the prompts, and whether they share them or not, they're online. But it's a great online community just for people that I'm writing healing. And you don't have to write just about healing topics, but many people do.
That's great. I'll be sure to have that linked up on the show notes page if anyone wants to check it out.
Awesome.
So, Cissy, I want to ask you the final question that I have for you today, and that is, given what you know now, if you could go back to when you were going through your tough times and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, God, I love that question. Just to have more compassion for how scrappy you have to be to survive, and that anytime, I think the one thing I was thinking, like, anytime you're having fun or anytime you're doing something you're really passionate or curious or joyful about, that is high level healing. It doesn't just have to be the work and the grueling and the effort part is healing. Like, joy is healing as well. And I didn't learn that till way older. And so I think I would put joy and fun in my life earlier. I mean, it's hard to do that when you don't feel safe. Joy and fun are not that appealing when you feel unsafe. But excuse me. But I wouldn't wait as long. You know, it's really important. It's one of the best parts of life, and it's one of the best parts of healing. And I think there were times when I would even cut short my fun to go, you know, be productive or look at an issue or focus on something. Or I think I would say have more fun, if possible.
Yeah, I love that. That it's such a great reminder for all of us that, you know, joy and fun are absolutely a part of healing, and we deserve to have a little joy and fun in our lives every once in a while.
Absolutely. As often as possible.
Yeah. Uh-huh. What's the best way for people to connect with you or find out more about what you have going on?
I have 2 places where you can reach me. It's the Heal Right Now website. I have an email link through there, and it's Heal and WRITE, so write, like writing. So Heal Right Now. And then also, if anyone's a parent, I am over at ACEs Connection Network, which is online, and it's just acesconnection.com. There's a parenting with adverse childhood experiences group for anyone that is looking to parent or works with parents who faced a lot of childhood adversity. So we're all working together to just share our experiences and brainstorm ways, coping techniques and tools and ways to make parenting easier for people that are you know, can't rely on instinct or, you know, past experiences. So just a place to have support and like make conscious decisions about parenting. So those are probably the 2 best places, and they're both free. They're just online resources.
Great. I will definitely have those linked up as well. And other than that, I just want to thank you for coming on here today and for joining me here to share your story. And it's really been great getting to connect with you and to hear about, you know, the journey that you've been on and the things that have helped you get to where you are today. So just thank you.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you so much for having this show and letting us all get to hear each other and learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the show today. This has been the Grass Gets Greener podcast, episode 101. Go to thegrassgetsgreener.com/Cissy White to find the links mentioned during this episode or to leave a comment. So I hope you enjoyed this episode today and were able to take something away from it. I really liked how we talked a lot about healing with others who have gone through something similar and who get you. That really is a powerful thing. And I also liked how Cissy referred to other survivors who have found some healing in their lives as Sherpas. And I really do hope my guests have been Sherpas for you in some way. I know that not everyone is going to resonate with everyone that I have on, but I do hope that you've been able to find your way a little better thanks to my amazing guests like Cissy, and that you know that you're not alone in what you're going through. And be sure to come back in 2 weeks to find out who the next Sherpa is going to be. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to continue to use that metaphor beyond this episode, but I do like it, so I just had to get it in there one more time. But seriously, do come back in 2 weeks for the next episode. And just a couple of quick reminders. This show does have a Patreon campaign over at thegrassgetsgreener.com/Patreon, Patreon. So if you like what I'm doing here and you want to help support it, you can do that there for as little as $1 a month and get some rewards in return. It'll help me to cover the expenses for doing the show, as well as allow me to do more with the show. Also, if you're looking for some coaching, I do offer coaching now. Email me at melissa@thegrassgetsgreener.com if you're interested in chatting about that. And also, don't forget to head over to iTunes or Stitcher to leave the show a rating and review so that we can reach as many survivors as possible. And, as always, have hope.